I still remember the way the rain fell that morning, soft at first, like the sky was whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. The house smelled of old wood and lavender, and the clock on the mantel ticked with a kind of loneliness that mirrored my own. My name is Margaret Hayes, and I've spent 78 years building a life out of love, routine, and silence. But silence can be dangerous. It can hide things you never wanted to know. For nearly 2 decades, I believed my husband, Richard, died peacefully in his sleep. The doctor had said it was his heart. Everyone had nodded sadly, grateful it had been painless. I had mourned him in that quiet way widows often do by pretending to move on. But grief is a sneaky companion. It doesn't vanish. It hides in drawers, in photographs, in the sound of a voice that isn't there anymore. It wasn't until last winter that I began to sense something was wrong. My granddaughter, Lily, had come to stay with me for a few months. She was 23, curious, and far too clever for her own good. She spent her evenings writing in her little leather-bound diary, her pen scratching softly against the pages long after midnight. I never asked what she was writing. I assumed it was about her boyfriends, her dreams, her studies. I was wrong, so very wrong. One afternoon, while dusting her room, I noticed the diary lying open on the desk. I didn't mean to look. Truly, I didn't. But there it was, my name written in her handwriting, bold and underlined. The line read, "Grandma doesn't know what really happened to Grandpa. She still believes the story Mom told her." My breath caught. The feather duster fell from my hand. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. What did she mean? The story Mom told her. My daughter, Caroline, had always been so protective, so insistent that I rest after Richard's death, that I not ask too many questions. I had trusted her. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house seemed to hum with secrets. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a whisper from the past. I lay awake until dawn, my heart aching with the same dull throb I had felt the day they took Richard's body away. Only now, it wasn't grief, it was doubt. The next morning, I made Lily her favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs and cinnamon toast, hoping the warmth of routine would calm my nerves. I watched her laugh at something on her phone, her golden hair catching the sunlight, so much like her grandfather's when he was young. "Lily," I asked carefully, "what did you mean in your diary about your grandpa? What story?" The color drained from her face. Her fork clattered against the plate. "You read my diary?" she whispered. "I didn't mean to," I said quickly. "It was open. I just saw one line. But what did you mean, sweetheart? What story?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Grandma, maybe it's not my place to—" "Please," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "You said I didn't know something about Richard. I have a right to know." Her eyes softened, but fear lingered there. "Mom told me not to say anything," she murmured. "She said it would only hurt you." The room felt suddenly colder. "Hurt me," I echoed. "My husband's been gone for 20 years. What could possibly hurt me now?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she stood abruptly and left the table, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. The slam of her bedroom door felt like a verdict. For days after that, Lily avoided me. I tried to go about my usual routine, watering the roses, reading on the porch, but everything felt heavy, meaningless. The house, once my refuge, now felt like a stranger's. I found myself replaying Richard's final day over and over again, the way he'd smiled at me that evening, the warmth of his hand on mine, the gentle goodnight kiss. There had been nothing unusual, no sign, no warning, just a man who went to bed and never woke up. Or so I thought. A week later, Lily left for a weekend trip with friends. The night she left, I couldn't resist the pull of that diary. I told myself I only wanted to understand, that I'd stop as soon as I found the truth. My hands trembled as I lifted the small book from her nightstand. The pages smelled faintly of ink and perfume. I turned to the entry dated November 12th, the same week she'd written about me. It began innocently enough, full of her thoughts on family, on love, on missing her late grandfather. But then the words shifted. Mom said Grandma still doesn't know the truth about Grandpa's death. She said it wasn't an accident, that someone helped it happen. I thought she was joking, but she cried when I asked again. The room spun around me. My knees gave way, and I sank into the armchair, clutching the diary to my chest. Someone helped it happen? I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My hands went cold. My daughter, my only child, had known this all along? The next entry chilled me even more. Mom said Grandpa had found out something he wasn't supposed to, something about money. She said that night wasn't what Grandma thinks. Money. My mind leapt to the arguments Richard and Caroline had toward the end about the farm, about selling part of the land. I had dismissed it as family tension, the sort that always blows over. But what if it hadn't? What if it had cost him his life? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the diary open on my lap, the grandfather clock ticking away the hours like a countdown to something inevitable. I thought about confronting Caroline. But if Lily's words were true, if my daughter had lied to me for all these years, what else was she capable of? By morning I was shaking from exhaustion, but my resolve was firm. I needed answers, and I needed them from Caroline herself. When I called her that afternoon, her voice sounded bright, rehearsed. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling?" I swallowed hard. "I found something, Caroline. In Lily's diary." There was silence on the other end. Then a soft sigh. "Mom, you shouldn't have read that." "I had to," I said, my voice breaking. "She wrote that Richard's death wasn't an accident, that someone helped it happen." "What does that mean, Caroline?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then she whispered, "It means I made a choice, Mom. A choice you were never supposed to know about." The line went dead. For a moment I couldn't move. The phone slid from my trembling hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The rain had started again outside, heavier this time, drumming against the windows like an angry memory come alive. My daughter's words echoed in my mind, a choice you were never supposed to know about. What kind of choice leads to death? I stood there for a long time, the house closing in around me. Somewhere deep down, I already knew that this was only the beginning. The world outside my window blurred as I stared into the rain, her voice echoing in my head, "A choice you were never supposed to know about." Those words settled over me like frost. What kind of choice takes a man's life? What kind of daughter hides that from her mother? I tried calling her again. Once, twice, 5 times. Each ring felt like a hammer striking my chest. No answer. My mind raced back 20 years to that awful night. Richard had spent the evening in his study, reading the old ledger books from the farm accounts. He'd seemed preoccupied, distracted. When I'd asked what was wrong, he'd smiled in that tired way of his and said, "Just numbers, Maggie, just numbers." But now those words meant something else entirely. I poured myself tea I couldn't drink. The rain had turned into a downpour, wind rattling the windows, and then I heard it a faint knock at the door. When I opened it, Lily stood there, drenched, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She must have come straight from the train. "Grandma," she whispered, trembling, "Mom's gone." My heart stopped. Gone? Gone where? She left. She packed her bags and left the house. Dad said she didn't even tell him where she was going. The words sank into me like stones. My daughter running away? After that phone call? "Come inside, sweetheart," I murmured, pulling her into the warmth. Her hands were ice cold. We sat by the fire. The flames danced between us, the silence thicker than smoke. Finally, she said, "Grandma, I didn't mean for you to find out this way. Mom told me everything a few months ago." She said Grandpa, he wasn't supposed to die that night, but he found out something about her, something big. I stared at her, my lips trembling. "What are you saying, Lily?" "She said there was money missing," Lily whispered. "From the farm accounts. Grandpa found out someone was stealing. He thought it was one of the workers, but it wasn't." I froze. Who was it? Her eyes filled with tears. It was Mom. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking, steady, cruel. My own daughter Richard's little girl, the one he adored, stealing from him. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, that can't be right. Caroline wouldn't—" "She told me herself, Grandma," Lily cut in. "She said she didn't mean to at first. She'd borrowed the money to pay off a loan. But when Grandpa found out, he said he was going to report it. He said it wasn't about the money, it was about trust." Tears burned my eyes. "He would never have gone to the police," I whispered. "He loved her. He would have found another way." "That's what I said," Lily replied. "But Mom said he was furious." That night they argued. She said she begged him not to tell you until she could fix it. But Grandpa refused. He said, "Secrets destroy families." I could see it, like a memory replaying before my eyes. Richard pacing the study, Caroline crying, her hands trembling, the air thick with anger, fear, regret. "What happened next?" I whispered. Lily looked down, twisting the hem of her sleeve. She said he collapsed, right there in front of her. She panicked. She didn't call an ambulance. I gasped. "She what?" "She didn't call anyone," Lily continued, sobbing now. "She thought he was dead already, but she wasn't sure. She said she waited until morning, then told you he'd passed in his sleep." The words cut through me like glass. I felt the room spin, my pulse roaring in my ears. My daughter, my Caroline, had let him die. I clutched my chest, breath coming shallow. Lily rushed to my side. "Grandma, please, you have to calm down." But I couldn't. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Why didn't she tell me? Why would she let me believe? My voice broke. All these years, I've mourned a peaceful death. I've prayed for him every night, thinking he was at peace. And she watched me do it? Lily nodded through tears. She said she couldn't bear to tell you. She thought it would destroy you. Destroy me? I hissed softly, my voice shaking. No, it destroyed her. We sat in silence, the fire crackling. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside, I was a ruin. The truth had finally clawed its way into the light, and it was uglier than I could have ever imagined. After some time, Lily spoke again. "Grandma, there's more." I looked at her, hollow-eyed. "More?" She said there was someone else involved, someone who helped cover it up. My stomach turned. "Who?" Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "Uncle Peter. Peter, Richard's brother. My brother-in-law. The man who'd handled the funeral, the paperwork, the will." I remembered how quickly he'd stepped in, how he'd insisted we shouldn't bother with an autopsy because Richard was old, and the stress of farm life probably took its toll. At the time, I was too numb to question it. Lily nodded, reading my thoughts. "Mom," said Uncle Peter, arranged everything. He made it look like natural causes. "She told him she'd pay him back for helping her." I felt sick. "And she did, didn't she? She gave him the land." Lily's eyes widened. "You know about that?" "Yes," I whispered bitterly. "A few months after Richard's death, Peter offered to buy half the farm. Caroline insisted we sell. I didn't want to, but she said we needed to pay off debts. I didn't know she was paying him. The fire crackled louder, throwing orange light across the room, and in that flicker I saw Richard's face in the shadows, kind, disappointed, distant. I whispered to him in my heart, "I'm so sorry, my love. I didn't see it. I didn't know." The silence stretched between us, heavy and unkind. Lily reached across and held my hand. "Grandma, what are you going to do?" "I don't know," I said softly, "but I can't let this stay buried. He deserves the truth." "Even if it ruins Mom?" she asked, her eyes wide. I looked into the flames. "Some things are already ruined, sweetheart. All that's left is to stop the rot from spreading." That night, long after Lily had gone to bed, I went into the study, the same room where Richard had spent his last night. The air felt thick, unmoved for years. I opened the desk drawers, the old filing cabinet, searching for something, anything, that could prove what had really happened. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of yellowed receipts, I found it, an envelope with my name written in Richard's handwriting. The ink had faded, but my heart recognized every curve of his pen. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single letter. The first line read, "If you're reading this, Maggie, then something has gone terribly wrong." The paper was brittle, but his voice was alive inside every stroke of ink. I pressed the letter to my heart first, a foolish little prayer, then unfolded it with the care you give to a newborn or a bomb. "If you're reading this, Maggie, then something has gone terribly wrong." I heard him as clearly as the day he left for town and never came back with the same light in his eyes. I stood because sitting felt irreverent, and I read, "I've been trying to make sense of the numbers for weeks. They don't add up, and not because I've gotten too old to add. Money is moving without my say transfers, labeled as equipment, fuel, wages we never paid." I confronted Peter. He laughed first. He always laughs when he's scared. Then he told me to leave it alone. He said families don't survive truth like this. That's when I knew it wasn't a mistake. My knees turned weak, and I lowered myself into Richard's old chair. The leather made a sighing sound, as if it remembered him. "I didn't come to you right away," the letter continued, "because I wanted to protect you from the mess until I had proof. I fear the proof points close to home. I believe Caroline is involved, though I pray I'm wrong. If you find the small tin behind the third plank in the study wall, you'll see the photocopies. And Maggie, if I'm gone, it means I pushed too hard." I glanced at the wall before I finished the page, already counting planks with my eyes. "There's one more thing. The land our northern pasture doesn't belong in any deal with Peter. Your name is on a deed I registered quietly years ago, after that big storm when we rebuilt the fence. You thought I was at the hardware store. I was at the county office. I wanted you protected if he ever tried anything. If the worst has happened, take that deed and run the truth like a flag up a high pole. It will bring the crows and the doves. Let them both come." The signature at the bottom, Richard tilted a little right, like he always signed in a hurry, like life was a field and there was light left to plow. My hands were steady now. Grief can shake you to pieces, but purpose welds you back together. I set the letter down and walked to the wall. Third plank from the window, waist high, the one with the knot like a teardrop. I pried with the butter knife I kept for jam and emergencies, and this counted as both. The plank groaned, lifted, and behind it I found what he promised. A small blue tobacco tin, the paint chipped like it had outlived 3 wars and a long winter. Inside were photocopies, bank transfers, receipts, a handwritten note in Peter's blunt script authorizing payments from contingency reserves, a term we'd never used. There were 2 ledgers copied page by page, one with our true balances, the other a fiction. And then a check made out from Caroline's account to a lender I didn't recognize, dated 3 weeks before he died. At the bottom lay a brass key tied to a strip of green cloth. A number was etched on the head, 318. I knew that number by feel. It hummed like a nerve. Safety deposit, First Union Bank on Maple Street. He and I had once joked about keys, how they were little promises, iron wishes that turned. I turned the tin over, and another scrap fluttered out. It was a photograph. Richard standing with Peter near the barn, both younger by a decade, the sky a hard blue. On the back, Richard had written, "He thinks he's a wolf. He forgets wolves travel in packs. We are a pack too." I wanted to run to the bank in my slippers. Night pressed its nose against the windows, and Lily slept upstairs, her breath a small tide. I waited with the key under my pillow the way a child waits for morning on Christmas. But there was no angel of joy in this house, only the steady-winged ghost of truth. At dawn I made coffee so strong it could stand up and argue. Lily came down with a blanket around her shoulders, eyes swollen but determined. When I showed her the tin and the letter, she read everything twice, jaw set the way her mother's used to set when she decided she was right before she knew the facts. "I'll drive you," she said. We didn't speak much on the way. The town looked the same and entirely different, the way a room does after a funeral, chairs where chairs always are, but the weight of them wrong. The bank doors slid open with that little sighing hush I'd always loved, as if money were fragile and we were trusted. We were not met with suspicion. We were met with a young man whose tie was too tight and whose name badge said Owen. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," he said after I presented the key and my identification. "Box 318 will get you a room." The private rooms in banks are like hospital rooms without the medicine white walls, quiet, a table that begs for careful hands. Owen placed the long steel box in front of me, nodded, and left us alone. The hinge sang a dry note as I lifted the lid. On top lay a sealed envelope with my name in Richard's hand, a softer script than the other letter, as if he'd written it late, with tenderness fighting time. Under it were folders tabbed with dates and names, transfers, appraisals, a deed stamped with the county seal and my name, Margaret Hayes, in black and indisputable print, and at the bottom a small cassette tape in a cracked plastic case, the label curling, "For Maggie," if needed. My fingers hovered over the envelope, then the tape. The tape felt like a heartbeat caught in amber. "Do you still have your old player?" Lily whispered. "In the hall closet," I said, "with the Christmas records and the sewing machine that sews crooked." I opened the envelope first. The letter was shorter. "Maggie, if this box is open, it means I've failed to keep what we built safe with my own hands. These papers show what Peter has been doing, bleeding us. I've also discovered why Caroline is in the middle. She didn't just borrow. She was blackmailed. There's an old debt from years ago, something she hid from us. I don't put that burden on you lightly, but you must know to forgive her for the beginnings, not the endings. The endings are her own. What comes next depends on whether she chooses truth. If I'm not there to help, use the deed. And, Maggie, one more secret that will sound like a lie told by a stranger. The money Peter is chasing isn't the treasure. The treasure is a living thing. Protect it with everything. You'll know it when it looks you in the eye. I read that line again and again. A living thing. Treasure. It sounded like his old way of talking about lambing season and tomatoes, how he called them miracles. But this felt like a code. I glanced at Lily and, for the briefest second, the light from the high window struck her eyes, and they flashed the same green fleck as Richard's when he was amused. I shook off the thought like a moth. We signed the withdrawal log and left with copies. I paid for more copies at the stationer's because paper is mortal and truth burns easily. Back home, I set the cassette on the kitchen table like a relic. The old player whined to life after 2 stern smacks, and when the tape clicked into place, the room filled with the low rustle of Richard breathing, then his voice, intimate and close, as if he were in the chair opposite, elbows on the table, that half-smile he wore when we plotted how to fix what wasn't yet broken. "Maggie," the speaker crackled, "if you're listening, then we've run out of the easy time. I won't waste what's left. Peter's been using shell invoices. The bank manager Harwell pretends not to see. I've confronted him once. He shook. He's not the architect, he's the doorman. Caroline came to me. She stood where you are standing now, and she tried to tell me half of a story. I asked her for the whole thing. She wouldn't. I told her I loved her. I still do. But love without truth is just lighting a lamp in a room with no windows. The tape hissed a moment, then continued, softer. There's another matter, and I'm sorry for it. Years ago, before Lily was born, Caroline called me from the clinic on Birch. She was crying. She'd made a mistake, not just with money, with a man. I felt Lily's hand find mine under the table, fingers tight. I told her we would stand with her no matter the name. She refused to give it. I'm recording this because if the blackmail is about that if Peter knows, then he's not just bleeding the farm, he's bleeding a wound that never closed. The man is closer than you think. I'm afraid the man is in our family's shadow. The kitchen light flickered. Somewhere the heater sighed awake. I've put everything in the box. The deed protects you. The rest is evidence. If you need help, go to Ruth Barrett at the paper. She owes me, and she fears nothing. And, Maggie, if you read this and you're angry with me for keeping the first letter from you, be angry. But know I kept it back because I didn't want you to spend one more sunrise on this earth with worry's teeth in your shirt. I wanted, for as long as I could give it, to keep your mornings clean. The tape clicked, hummed, then fell silent. Lily pulled her hand away and wiped at her eyes in that hard, quick way of young people who don't want to be seen crying. "Grandma," she whispered, "the man, do you think it was Uncle Peter?" I looked out the window. The rain had quit and left the world washed. The maple shone like it had swallowed a sun. "I don't know," I said. "I know Peter is the wolf at the door, but wolves don't father lambs." The words felt strange as soon as I said them, and a chill crossed my shoulders. I turned to Lily, and she held my gaze in that brave, frightened way people do when they already expect the worst and still hope for the gentle version. "Grandma," she said, voice barely there, "there's something I didn't tell you from my diary. Mom told me the blackmail started when someone got hold of a paternity test 23 years ago. The clock in the hall struck the hour, each chime a nail. I swallowed. "A test for who?" I asked, though somewhere deep in the cave of me, an answer had already lit its own dark lantern. "For me," Lily whispered. "And the test," said Grandpa Richard, "wasn't my biological grandfather." The room shifted, the air thinned, and beyond the window a crow cut a black line across the bright. I gripped the edge of the table until the wood pressed crescents into my palms. "The treasure," Richard had said, "is a living thing, protected with everything. You'll know it when it looks you in the eye." Lily's eyes, those green-flecked eyes, looked straight into mine, and somewhere in their light, a door I hadn't known existed swung open to a hallway I wasn't sure I wanted to walk. The silence that followed was unlike any I had ever known. It wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating, thick, like the air itself didn't want to move. My heartbeat filled the room, echoing inside my chest like a slow, broken drum. I stared at Lily, her face pale but resolute. She didn't flinch under my gaze. Her eyes, Richard's eyes, held mine with a trembling courage that only deepened the ache in my chest. What do you mean?" I finally whispered, my voice a dry rasp. She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting around the sleeve of her sweater. "Mom told me about it a year ago. She said there was a test. It was taken when I was a baby. She said someone sent it to her in the mail. No return address. Just the results and one sentence written at the bottom." My throat tightened. "What sentence?" Her lips trembled as she spoke. It said, "He's not the father, but he knows." For a moment I couldn't see. The world blurred, as if the truth itself refused to stay in focus. I pressed a trembling hand against the table. "Who?" I breathed. "Who was the father?" Lily looked down. "She never told me, Grandma. She said it was someone close to the family, someone she swore she'd never speak of again." I felt my stomach twist into knots. "And that's what Peter used to blackmail her?" She nodded. "Mom said she had an affair before I was born, that the man disappeared soon after she told him she was pregnant. Grandpa found out somehow, but he never confronted her, not until the money started vanishing. She said Uncle Peter found out too, and used it to control her." I stood from the chair, my knees weak, and moved to the window. Outside, the world was gray, the fields drenched in winter's sorrow. I could still see Richard in my memory, walking that same land with his hands in his pockets, whistling softly, always believing in forgiveness. "Your grandfather," I murmured. "He must have known the truth. That's why he called you the treasure. He said it was a living thing." Lily turned to me, confused. "What do you mean?" I faced her, tears welling. "He must have known you weren't his by blood, but he loved you anyway. He saw you as the treasure that had to be protected, not because you carried his name, but because you carried hers, because he feared what others might do if they knew." The realization crushed me and lifted me all at once. My Richard, with all his quiet grace, had chosen love over betrayal, truth over vengeance. But it had cost him his life. Lily's voice broke the silence. "Grandma, there's something else." I turned slowly. "What now, darling?" "When Mom ran away that night after your phone call, I got an email from her. It came just before I reached your house. It had an attachment." I frowned. "An attachment?" She nodded and pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she unlocked it. "It was a scanned letter. She said she couldn't face you yet, but she wanted me to give you this if something happened to her. A dread unlike anything I'd ever felt settled over me." "Something happened to her?" "I don't know," Lily whispered. "But the email said she was leaving to make things right. She hasn't answered my calls since." She handed me the phone. On the screen was a letter Caroline's handwriting, familiar and shaky. I pressed my lips together and began to read. "Mom, if Lily shows you this, then I've already done what I have to do. I can't live with this secret anymore. For 20 years, I've carried it like a stone in my chest, pretending it was love. But the truth is, Dad didn't just collapse that night. He fought. He begged me to call for help. I froze. I didn't mean for him to die, but I didn't save him either. And then Peter came. He told me he'd handle everything, that he'd make it look natural. But in return, he made me his prisoner. Every dollar, every decision, every lie I told you was his price for silence. Mom, the man who blackmailed me wasn't just Peter. There was another. The man who started all of this. The one who made me believe I couldn't tell anyone the truth about Lily. I think he's still watching me. I think he's watching Lily too. If something happens to me, promise me you'll protect her. Don't trust anyone from the family, not even Peter's sons. They know. I'm going to the cabin by the lake, the one Dad built for you when you were newly married. If I don't come back, you'll know where to find me. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For letting him die. For letting you live with lies. I love you more than you'll ever know. Caroline. By the time I finished, tears were streaming freely down my face. My hands shook so badly the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. The cabin, I whispered. She's gone there. Lily looked terrified. Grandma, that place hasn't been used in years. It's falling apart. What if I have to go? I said firmly. If she's in trouble, I can't sit here. Then I'm coming with you. The old truck coughed to life like a dying man remembering his first breath. The drive to the lake took over an hour, the road winding through trees that whispered like gossiping ghosts. The sky was heavy with clouds, but the storm hadn't broken yet. When we finally reached the cabin, my heart ached. Time had not been kind to it. The paint had peeled, the porch sagged, and ivy crawled across the windows like nature trying to reclaim forgotten sins. Mom? I called as I stepped onto the creaking porch. Caroline, it's me. No answer, only the sound of the wind and the distant lap of water against the shore. I turned the rusty handle unlocked. The air inside was cold, damp, and filled with the scent of mold and pine. Dust lay thick on every surface except the kitchen table, where a single candle burned beside a stack of papers, and next to it Caroline's scarf. My heart clenched. She's been here. Lily picked up a folded note from the table. Grandma, it's addressed to you. I took it and unfolded it with trembling fingers. Only 5 words were written in Caroline's unmistakable scrawl. He's still alive. Forgive me. The words hit me like thunder. I staggered back. The air ripped from my lungs. Alive? I whispered. Who's alive? Lily looked at me, her face drained of color. Grandpa? She whispered. The candle flickered violently, casting long shadows across the walls. And for the first time since his death, I felt it not memory, not grief, but presence, as if somewhere in the darkness of that old cabin, Richard was still waiting to be found. The candlelight trembled, its flame bowing and swaying as if aware of the storm that had entered that cabin with us. My eyes were still on those 5 words. He's still alive. Forgive me. The ink was smeared at the edges, as though Caroline's hands had been shaking when she wrote it. Lily stood frozen, her breath shallow. Grandma, what if she meant Grandpa? My voice caught in my throat. I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever she meant, we're going to find out. The wind outside howled like an animal, and the trees groaned in reply. I picked up the candle. its light wobbling against the walls, and began to search. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms and an attic, but the air was heavy, almost electric, like it was guarding something. "Check the kitchen," I said. "I'll look near the fireplace." Every floorboard cried under my feet. Cobwebs clung to the corners, dust thick enough to bury memories. I ran my fingers along the wooden mantel, tracing names Richard had carved there decades ago. M+R equals forever. The knife marks were faded, but they still whispered of a love that once filled every inch of this place. Then, faintly just beneath the floorboards, I heard it. A sound, a shuffle, a scrape. "Lily," I whispered, "do you hear that?" She stopped moving. For a second there was only wind. Then it came again, a soft, dragging noise, like something or someone moving below. "Grandma," she breathed. "Is there a basement?" I shook my head slowly. "No, just the storage crawl space under the floor." The sound came again, louder now. I set the candle on the table, grabbed the old iron poker from beside the hearth, and knelt near the rug. There was a trapdoor there, half hidden under the woven mat. Richard had built it years ago for storing canned goods and tools. My heart hammered. "Help me lift it." Lily crouched beside me, her hands trembling as we peeled back the rug and found the handle a rusted metal ring set into the wood. I pulled, and the trapdoor creaked open with a long, dreadful sigh. A cold breath rose from below, damp and stale, smelling of earth and time. "Stay behind me," I whispered, gripping the poker tight. We peered down into the darkness. At first, nothing but shadow. Then, movement. A shape. "Grandma!" Lily gasped, reaching for my arm. A figure was curled in the corner of the crawl space, thin, still. Then, slowly, so painfully slowly, it lifted its head. The candlelight caught his face, and my world stopped. White hair, hollow cheeks, eyes that knew me, eyes I had buried in my dreams every night for 20 years. "Richard?" I whispered. My voice cracked in disbelief. The figure blinked once, then again. His lips trembled. "Maggie!" he rasped. The sound of his voice shattered something inside me. The poker slipped from my hand and clattered against the wood. My knees gave way, and I fell to the floor, sobbing. "Grandma, is that—" Lily couldn't even finish. "Yes," I whispered. "It's him." I reached down into the dark, my fingers brushing his hand. It was cold but real, trembling as it clutched mine. "How?" I breathed. "How are you alive?" He coughed, his voice weak, dry. "Not supposed to be found." "Sweetheart, you're safe now," I said, tears streaming. "You're safe. We'll get you out." Lily ran to fetch the blanket and flashlight from the truck while I stayed there holding him. His face was a ghost of the man I remembered, sunken but familiar, fragile yet still him. When Lily returned, we helped him out of the crawl space, each movement a struggle. He winced, gasping, but his grip on my arm was strong. I could feel his bones, sharp and frail, but his eyes, those eyes burned with something fierce. Once we settled him near the fire, he turned to me, his voice barely above a whisper. She found me. Caroline? I asked, wiping tears from his face. He nodded weakly. Last week, she came here, thought I was dead. All this time, Peter told her I was gone, but he kept me here. I felt the blood drain from my face. Peter? He kept you here? Why? Richard coughed violently, clutching his chest. He wanted the land, the farm, everything. Said if Caroline didn't obey him, he'd show her the truth. Said no one would believe a madman locked away. Lily's hands flew to her mouth. He made everyone think you died? Richard's head dropped forward. Doctor was paid, papers forged. Peter handled it all, said it was for the family's good. Said I'd ruin Caroline's life if I spoke about her secret. I felt my stomach turn. The secret, Lily's father. He closed his eyes. I forgave her. But Peter didn't. He used it. He kept her chained with guilt. When she realized I was alive, she promised she'd come back. She said she'd fix it. Lily's voice shook. That's why she came here. Richard nodded faintly. She left 2 nights ago. Said she was going to end it. I tried to stop her, but I was too weak. End it? I whispered. What does that mean? Where did she go? Richard looked up, his eyes clouded with pain. She said she was meeting Peter one last time. At the dock. Lily's breath caught. The old dock? The one by the woods? He nodded. Please, find her, Maggie, before he does something terrible. I squeezed his hand. I will. I promise. Lily grabbed my arm. Grandma, it's dark. We can't. But I was already moving. We can't wait, I said firmly. If she's in danger, we don't have time. The storm had finally broken when we stepped outside. Rain lashed against our faces, cold and merciless. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness in trembling arcs as we made our way through the trees. Branches clawed at our clothes, mud sucked at our boots. The lake appeared ahead, black and vast, swallowing the world in its reflection. And there, near the dock, I saw at headlights. A car. Lily clutched my hand. Grandma, someone's still here. We crept closer, hearts pounding. The wind howled, carrying voices, a man's, a woman's, then a gunshot. The sound tore through the rain like lightning. Lily screamed. I froze. Mom, she cried, sprinting ahead. Lily, wait! I shouted, but she was already running toward the dock. Through the sheets of rain, I saw 2 figures, one collapsing, one standing over them. Peter, I'd know that hunched silhouette anywhere. Caroline, I screamed, rushing forward. Peter turned, eyes wide, soaked and wild. Maggie? You shouldn't be here. But I was, and nothing in the world could stop me now. He raised the gun again, his hand shaking, but before he could fire, Lily lunged at him, knocking the weapon into the water. They both slipped, falling to the dock. I ran to Caroline, her face pale, her body trembling, blood seeping through her coat. Mom, she whispered, voice thin. I did it. I ended it. You're free now. No, I sobbed, cradling her head. Stay with me, baby, please. Her eyes fluttered. Tell Dad. I found him. And then silence. The rain fell harder, washing everything away but the truth. The sound of the gun sinking into the lake was swallowed by the storm, but the echo of that single shot stayed suspended in the air like it refused to die. Caroline's head was heavy in my lap, her hair slicked with rain and blood. I whispered her name over and over, rocking her the way I did when she was a baby, hoping the rhythm of her mother's voice would call her back. Caroline, please, stay with me. You'll be all right. Sweetheart, you'll be all right. But she was already gone. Her eyes were half open, her lips curved into the faintest smile, as if she'd finally laid her burden down. Behind me, Lily sobbed. Peter lay sprawled on the dock, groaning, one arm twisted from the fall. The gun was gone, his power scattered with it. For a moment, I almost couldn't move. I stared at the man I'd once called brother-in-law, the man who had stood beside me at Richard's funeral, his voice trembling as he swore to protect me. I rose slowly, my knees aching, every movement fueled by something ancient, rage, love, justice, maybe, all three. Why, Peter? My voice shook, but it carried above the rain. Why destroy everything we built? Why keep him locked away? He tried to sit up, coughing hard. You don't understand, Maggie. Richard was going to ruin us all. He was obsessed with the money, with the secrets. I was just trying to protect the family. Protect? I spat. You murdered your own brother's peace. You made me grieve a man who was still breathing. His eyes flinched. He was weak, he rasped. Too forgiving. He would have turned Caroline in. He didn't have the stomach to do what needed to be done. Like keeping him hidden under the floorboards of his own cabin, I shouted. You chained him to rot while you stole his name and his farm. Peter's lips curled into a cruel smirk. You wouldn't have survived the truth, Maggie. You were always too soft. Soft? I stepped closer, my hands shaking but steady in intent. Soft is what loved you even when you didn't deserve it. Soft is what buried your crimes under prayer instead of justice. But don't mistake soft for blind. He tried to rise again, but Lily moved first. She snatched the flashlight from the dock and shone it directly into his face. The light cut across his features, revealing the years of greed etched deep into his skin. You're done, she said, her voice trembling but clear. The police are coming. Grandma called them before we left the cabin. They'll find everything, the tin, the letters, the tape. Grandpa's alive, and he's going to tell them everything. Peter's face fell, disbelief flickering into terror. Alive? Yes, I said, stepping closer. And he's waiting for justice. He stared at me for a long second, the truth sinking in. Then, with a desperate growl, he lunged toward the edge of the dock, as if escape still existed in a world that had already closed around him. But his foot slipped. The wood gave way under his weight, and before either of us could move, Peter tumbled into the dark water. The lake swallowed him whole. Lily screamed. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back, both of us frozen as the ripples widened, then stilled. For a long, unbearable moment, all we could hear was the rain easing into a slow, steady drizzle. When the flashing red and blue lights finally pierced the darkness, I felt no relief, only exhaustion. 2 officers pulled Peter's lifeless body from the lake, his face pale and still, eyes open to the sky he'd never own again. Another officer carried Caroline's body to the ambulance, her hand slipping from mine as they took her away. Lily stood beside me, drenched and shaking, her fingers interlaced with mine. "It's over," she whispered, but I wasn't sure it was. Some things never truly end, they just find a quieter corner of your soul to haunt. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was washed clean, a fragile blue streaked with light. We drove back to the cabin to bring Richard home. The police had already been there. They'd seen him, spoken to him. The doctors said he was frail but lucid. When I walked through that doorway again, I found him sitting by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, eyes half closed but alive. When he saw me, his lips curved into a trembling smile. "Maggie," he whispered. I fell to my knees before him, taking his hands in mine. "Oh, my love," I choked. "I thought I lost you forever." He brushed my cheek with shaking fingers. "I tried to reach you. I called for you in my dreams every night." We cried quietly together, the kind of tears that come when words no longer matter. After a while, Lily came in and sat beside us. Richard looked at her long and hard, his gaze softening with every second. "You have her strength," he said gently. Lily's voice wavered. "You knew, didn't you, about me?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, child, but blood isn't what makes a family. It's who stays when the world starts to fall apart." Her tears came then hot, unstoppable. She leaned into him, and he held her as if reclaiming all the lost years. Later, when the police were done with their questions, and the cabin had emptied of strangers, I found myself outside, watching the lake. The water was calm again, hiding its sins under a sheen of silver. I thought of Caroline, my stubborn, broken girl, who had carried too many secrets for too long. I thought of the man I buried twice, once in grief, once in truth. And I thought of Lily, standing on the edge of a life she never asked for but would now inherit with both pain and pride. Richard joined me, leaning on his cane. "She's the best of both of them," he said softly. "Caroline's heart, your courage." I smiled weakly. "And your eyes." He chuckled faintly. "You always did love my eyes." I slipped my arm around his. "They were the first thing I fell in love with, remember?" He looked out at the horizon. "Do you think she's at peace now, Caroline?" I followed his gaze. The sun was breaking through the clouds, scattering gold over the lake's surface. "Yes," I said finally. She carried the truth to its end. That's all any of us can do. We stood there until the light touched everything, the trees, the cabin, the path that led back home. When we left the lake that day, I took one last look at the water. It shimmered quietly, like it was holding the final secret close. Maybe it was right to let it. Some truths are meant to rest, not to be shouted from rooftops. As we drove away, Lily reached from the back seat and took my hand. "Grandma," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up." I turned to her and smiled through tears. "Oh, my darling, the only thing stronger than truth is love. That's what keeps us alive even after everything else is gone." Richard squeezed my other hand, his fingers warm against mine. Home? He asked. Home, I whispered, and as the road curved toward the morning light, I knew the ghosts would never truly leave, but they would walk beside us quietly, forgiven and finally free.